Okay, today, girlfriend was going to read chapter 34 to you, but she decided at the last minute that she is way too shy. So she's not going to read it, and she's going to let me read it to you. All right, you ready to read? All right. Chapter 34. You okay? All right. I waited for a reply. Twice a day, the postman dropped letters through the slot on the front door. Twice a day, I went to look. Susan said it would take at least 2 days for the letter to get to London. Yep. And 2 days for an answer to come back to us. But 10 days passed, and still there was nothing. I bet they aren't delivering letters in London, Jamie said, because of the war. I could tell by the look on Susan's face that she didn't think that was true. On the 12th day, a letter I recognized fell at my feet, my own. Return to sender was scrawled across it, no longer at this address. She's moved, Susan said, turning the unopened envelope in her hands. She lives somewhere else now. Susan said perhaps Ma'am had a new job and had moved closer to it. She said perhaps the government had requisitioned our flat. She said there were a number of reasons that Ma'am might have moved, and that didn't mean she'd abandoned us. And she, Susan, would make inquiries through the WVS. Someone in London was bound to know where Ma'am had gone. What happened to us? Jamie asked, wide-eyed. Or what happens to us? You stay with me, Susan said, just like you do now. Your ma'am knows where you are. She knows you're safe. What happens when the war is over? Susan took a deep breath. Your ma'am will come and get you. What if she doesn't? Jamie insisted. Don't worry, Susan said. I'll make sure someone always takes care of you. I'll take care of him, I said, suddenly furious. I took care of him before, not Ma'am. I hated. Oh, even in my head, I still couldn't say I hated Ma'am. Even now, if I could get my foot fixed, maybe she'd be different. Maybe she'd love me. Maybe she would. You did a good job taking care of Jamie, Susan said, but it was a big job, and you shouldn't have had to do it. So now you can relax. I can take care of you. You don't have to fight so hard. She couldn't take care of me. She talked about fixing my foot, but she couldn't do it. Not really. It was all just lies. And I wanted my foot fixed so badly. I was tired of it hurting. I wanted to be like a normal person. I wanted to walk without crutches, and I wanted to go to school, and I wanted to wear shoes on both feet. I never wanted to be locked up again. I hated crying, but I couldn't help it. I sat on the sofa and sobbed. Susan held me to her. I know, she said. I'm so sorry. I know. She stroked my hair. If it was emergency surgery, she said, if you broke your leg or if your life was in danger, I could give permission for that. But this is a big operation, and it is elective. You can survive without it. I can't give permission. I've asked the WVS, and I've consulted a lawyer, and without your ma'am's permission, we can't have it done. I'm so sorry. We'll keep looking for her. We'll find her. I don't want to just survive, I said. I know, Susan said. So you'll have to figure out how to make that happen without fixing your foot. It's hard, she said, but that's the truth. The winter turned fierce. Snow drifted over the fields and made it impossible for Butter to climb our hill. Even the ride to Fred's was so wretchedly cold I dreaded it. I went every day now for afternoon feed because the winter work was too much for Fred. He didn't watch me ride. It was far too cold for that. I put Butter in a stall and did chores with Fred as fast as possible, and then I rode home. Water froze in the troughs. The horses ate mountains of hay. It's getting to be too much for you, Susan said when I came home with my toes and fingers numb, shivering so hard I couldn't stop. If Fred can't manage, Lady Thornton will have to hire someone to help him, war or no war. It's not too much for me, I said. I promise. Susan insisted I would attend the village school next year. She borrowed all sorts of books from the town library and made me read them. If I couldn't read a word, I was supposed to ask her what it meant. The more I read, the less I had to ask. She started me on math and history, too. Our days went like this. Susan woke us in the dark and cold. We washed up and dressed as quickly as we could. Downstairs, Jamie tended to the fire in the living room while Susan worked the range. I went out to give Butter hay. After breakfast, Jamie washed the dishes by himself while Susan and I took the blackouts down. Then we had housework, reading, and sewing. Jamie played with Bovril on the rug. Lunch, school for Jamie, shopping for Susan, me helping Fred. More chores than dinner. Susan would read out loud while she massaged my bad foot, and then we went to sleep under the mountain of blankets Susan had piled on our bed. Susan looked horrified when the first chilblains appeared on my bad foot. I shrugged. I always get them, I said. She shook her head at me and consulted Fred. He found a piece of stout leather meant for tack repair, and together he and Susan designed a sort of boot. I stepped my bad foot into it and buttoned it up the side. It was loose, so I could wear extra stockings, and Fred oiled it until it stayed dry, even in wet, mushy snow. That kept the chilblains from getting worse. They didn't heal, however, which distressed Susan. I don't know why, I said. They're not bad. They must hurt, she said. I shrugged. They did, and the itching sometimes kept me awake at night. But I couldn't do anything about it. My foot always hurts, I said. I always get chilblains in winter. I usually get them on my hands as well. Next winter, Susan said, we'll stop them before they get started. There must be some way. I looked at her. Will I be here next winter? She said, it's starting to look that way. The war is not going anywhere. She bought goose grease in the village and rubbed it on my sores. And that is... oh, we got just 2 more pages. Okay. Stephen's colonel invited me for tea again, and this time I went. The winter was so bleak, I was glad to have something different to do. And anyway, I wasn't as afraid of things as I'd been. The colonel wore several cardigans layered over his waistcoat, even though his parlor was warm. He presided very grandly over a tea table with scones and small ham sandwiches. My dear, he said happily, we've saved up our butter ration for you. They had a whole little dish of butter along with jam for the scones. Thank you, I said. Take plenty, he urged. I took a tiny sliver. More than that, he ordered, as though he could see me. I laughed. Stephen said, she's got loads, don't worry. And after that, it was easy to relax and eat. Stephen said there was a new poster up by the train station. It showed Hitler listening to some British people's conversation. Careless talks costs lives, Stephen quoted. That's what it says on the newsreels. Susan had taken us to see the film The Wizard of Oz, but she'd let me stay in the lobby during the newsreel. I said, Jamie worries about spies, but I don't know if they're really real. The government's so full of talk. How many spies do you think there really are? Hundreds, the colonel said. They're everywhere. It was spies that sunk the Royal Oak. How else could a submarine have gotten into Scapa Flow? I knew that was what people said. Yes, but you think we don't have spies right now in occupied France, in Germany itself? Of course we do. Stands to reason they'd have spies here. I told him how I always looked out from the top of the hill from where I could see such a long way. He nodded. You keep a lookout everywhere, he said. I tell Stephen, pay attention to everything. You never know. One word in German, one false move. Stephen, grinning, helped me to another scone. I grinned back. Posters or newsreels or spies notwithstanding, it was hard to sit in a warm parlor with snow falling outside and really believe in the war. But by the end of January, German U-boats had sunk 56 ships in that month alone. Most were cargo ships trying to bring food and supplies to England. In February, the Germans sunk another 51. The shops looked sparse. Coal supplies ran low, and the weather bore down on us like a cold, heavy weight. We went to bed earlier and slept later in the morning just to avoid the black misery. Until, finally, the days began to brighten. And that is the end of chapter 34.